Hi, friends. We're here. We finally made it to the conclusion of my miniature cat house customization. If you haven't seen part 1 and part 2, make sure to go watch those because I worked really hard to get to this point. Go on. I'll wait. Okay, let me remind the rest of you, and the cheaters out there who didn't watch, how we got here. In part 1, I put together the structure of the house, including making the first floor some kind of angular fun house, and working towards my electrician's license. In part 2, I decorated the outside of the house and created a few new plant species. Now we're here, and we're ready to move in some furniture and finally meet our feline residents. We're going to start on the first floor. First, we need to add a picture frame. I'm going to do this first, not because it's remotely exciting, but because I need room to get my fat hand in there. And I'm going to do this small one at the same time while I'm at it, even though that one will go upstairs. I used the pictures that came in the kit instead of redoing them like I did in part 2, because they weren't too terrible. I mean, sometimes I am capable of restraint. I glued them onto the picture frames and then glued the larger one into the house. Next, we're going to make a little house for the cats. Well, they already have a little house, but we're going to make a littler house to go inside their bigger little house. First, I need to glue it together. And this, I glued square at least. It's not crooked. But somehow the pieces don't fit together correctly. I mean, I checked and double-checked, but somehow the bottom still didn't fit. So I must have messed this up again. I blame these instructions, but I'm still not getting hired as a contractor anytime soon. Luckily, I'm good at making things work. So I sanded down one side of the floor piece until it fit into the house. Making it shorter on one side, though, also meant that the holes where the feet will go are smaller on that side. So I did a very rough measurement and cut and chipped away at the wood until the hole was big enough again. It's pretty rough looking, but I'm going to paint over the whole thing anyway, so I don't care too much. I glued the bottom on, glued these little panels on the side, and then finally glued the feet on. After all of these tiny pieces dried, I threw on a white base coat to block out some of the green on this so that it wouldn't dull the other colors. I'm going to paint the top of this house a waffle cone color because this is going to be an ice cream cone. An upside down ice cream cone. Most of the top of this house is going to have some fabric over it, and I didn't want to cover up the ice cream because that's the best part. So the ice cream is going to be on the bottom. Some nice strawberry ice cream. And then I added some sprinkles with paint markers. No gluing sprinkles on this for me. For the fabric that is going to go on top, we have to go back in time to before I painted the house. I used the house itself to make sure that the measurements for this fabric were accurate. Back in the present, I just glued the fabric on. And added the waffle lines since I forgot earlier. I blame the 25 breaks that I needed to take while waiting for things to dry. But we're not done with this house yet. No, we need to make a little cushion for the inside. The kit came with these kind of boring fabrics, but luckily I also have a pretty decent fabric cord. And I happen to have these checkered fabrics in my exact color scheme. The instructions for this have me making a 3mm seam on each side by folding it over and gluing it down. But this is tiny, and I can't really get the fabric to stay folded, so I used some super professional equipment to hold them in place. After the seams were done, I glued it into a little envelope shape. The dried, gluey fabric is kind of stiff, but I was able to pry it apart a little bit with a toothpick while I crammed some stuffing in. Then I glued the end closed, and once that dried, I added it to the littler cat house. And then added that to the bigger little cat house. The next item to make is this scratching board. I'm not altering this one too much, except painting it pink. If you're wondering about the clothespin, it was on there so that I could set it down to dry without touching anything. The scratchy center part of the scratcher is going to be more of this woven fabric on one side. And then on the back of that, I glued short strips of this rope. Well, they called it paper yarn. After all of the glue was dry, I trimmed the sides off and then trimmed the ends down until it fit inside the frame. Then I glued it in and added the board to the house. Next, we have what they call a cat sofa. It's basically another little cat bed. These cats need lots of soft places to rest after all those runs on the slide. For this sofa, we're going to make a cushion out of a circle of blue fabric and a circle of woven fabric. I glued them almost all the way around, shoved some stuffing in, and then closed it up using my genius binder clip method. Speaking of genius methods to hold things, I came up with another one while making the rest of this sofa. On this little basin, I needed to glue more of this paper yarn rope stuff around the inside and the outside. It sounds so easy. I thought it would be easy. It was not, in fact, easy. This paper yarn is pretty stiff, so it doesn't want to just lay nicely along the edges, even though I was super liberal with the glue. Every time I tried to make a new row, it would just pull up. So rather than pausing every few centimeters to let it dry, I used paper clips to hold the yarn down as I worked. Listen, I can hear you screaming at your screens.
Rose, use hot glue.
But I couldn't hear you at the time I was filming this. And it's the future now. I can't go back and change the bad choices I already made. I used up my one-time travel ticket to show you how I cut fabric for the cat house. But moving on, this cat bed has a little feather toy on a spring. So first, I need to make a spring out of this little wire that I need to strip the rubber off of. Most of the times I've used wire in this kit, I need to strip it. It would just be easier if it came naked to begin with. But fine, I'll undress this wire, and then I'll wrap it and make a little spring. The kit comes with red and yellow paper to make feathers, but since I needed to customize absolutely everything, I used a blue paper that I had. I glued the feathers onto the spring, and then glued the spring onto the side of the cat sofa. I put the little cushion in, blue side up, because who wants to lay on that scratchy fabric? And then I put the whole thing in the house. Next, we need to make some cans of cat food. And the kit came with these really ugly cat food labels. They say something about tickets, which doesn't even make sense, so of course I designed my own. But I do need to cut out these little circles because they'll be the top and bottom of the cans. To stiffen the labels and make the top and bottom shiny, I use this aluminum tape. I put all of the pieces on the sticky side and then cut everything out again. Then I'm just supposed to glue these all together, bing bang boom. This was not bing bang boom. I got stuck on bing. I tried gluing one of the little tabs of the top to the outside label and then wrapping the label in a circle. But the aluminum tape is so stiff that as soon as I tried to bend the outside label into a circle, the little tab of the top would come off. I tried waiting until the glue fully dried, and it still popped off. I ended up having to use aluminum tape inside the label to hold it in a circle around a paintbrush, just long enough to coat the outside seam in glue, and then clothespin the whole thing until it dried. Once it was dry, I was able to glue the ends on. It was not easy, and they don't look great, but they'll do. And now that we have cat food, we need a bowl for the cats to eat from. Luckily, this kit came with one. But I don't want a white bowl, so I painted it yellow. And then I varnished it so it'd be nice and shiny. The kit came with a little label for the bowl, but of course I made my own. And the last instructions call for making food out of little rolled up pieces of paper. But I'm not doing that. Not when I have all of these cute sprinkles to use. And now our first floor is complete. Now up to the second floor. First, let me glue in this tiny little picture of one single cat. Then, for our first piece of furniture, we're going to make a cat tree. Starting with the pieces of the little base, I painted one side of them white. These are going to be the inside of the bottom cube thing, and I know I'm not going to be able to get a paintbrush inside once it's all glued together. After the base coat, I glued everything together, and finally, something came out how it's supposed to, and not crooked. This cat tree is going to have a swirly candy theme, so I painted it pink and then added a white swirl to the sides. I painted the little landing levels pink and added a swirl to the top floor, or the roof, the penthouse. The little post that's going to hold up all of these landings is going to be this paper straw wrapped with some paper yarn. I glued it as I went and added the landings every so often, and then wrapped all the way to the top. I glued the penthouse level on, and then glued the whole structure onto the top of this box house thing. Of course, this house needs a cushion because we can never have too many of those. So I used more blue checkered fabric. The instructions have you fold the fabric in half and then just glue some stuffing on top, but that seems strange and itchy. So instead, I'm going to make them another little pillow, in the same way that I made one for the ice cream house. I'll add it into the cube at the bottom, pretending that it fits correctly, and then pivot this whole tree into the house. Now we need to make another toy. Downstairs has that feather thing, and this floor is going to have a ball on a pole, like a tether ball for cats. The base is made out of 2 spirals of this paper yarn. Since the yarn is so stiff, I really struggled to get it to wrap nicely in a spiral. So I basically coated it in glue like paper mache. And I mean, I really massaged that glue into the yarn. At one point, I even considered gluing the piece down to the silicone mat and then peeling it up once it dried, but instead I just went with heaps of glue and my trusty binder clip method. Once both spirals were dry and had a little bit of a binder clip dent in them, I glued them together, and then I trimmed off the very end of the yarn so it was a nice smooth circle. To make the pole that the ball will hang from, I'm going to wrap yarn around this tiny little stick. I started in the middle with a long length of yarn and then wrapped towards each end, securing the ends while it dried. Then I snipped off the extra and glued the pole onto the base, reinforcing it with more glue. To decorate this a little bit, the kit comes with these strips of blue paper to wrap around the pole. I wanted to change the color to pink, and I decided instead to use ribbon since it was the same thickness and I already had it. But the pink ribbon I had was so light that you couldn't really see it against the rope. So I ended up switching back to blue. I did still end up using ribbon. I don't really have a good reason other than laziness. The ribbon required 1 cut where the paper required 4. Last, I need to assemble the actual ball mechanism. I'm going to use a blue bead instead of the red one that they provided, and more of this tiny wire, but I'm only going to peel a little bit at the end to wrap around the black wire. I said to wrap around the black wire. I strung the bead on the other end of the wire and then tucked the wire back into the top of the bead so that when I pulled it tight, the bead was secure. Then I put a little glue on it to secure it. All I need to do is glue this black wire on the pole. But how? It's a thin wire with a very tiny cross section that is obviously heavier on one side. And I'm supposed to glue that tiny thing to the top of a pole? And it's just gonna stay? Or am I supposed to hold it up for 2 hours while it dries? After it tipping over and coming off multiple times, I bent a little tail on the end so that I could glue that flat onto the top of the pole. And then, I'm not sure if I'm embarrassed or proud, but I rigged an unbent paper clip to hook over the base and balance the wire while I left it to dry. But finally, it's done, and I can give it to these dumb cats. Now, we need to make another cozy spot for the cats to rest after they inevitably break my tetherball pole. And this is basically just an easy square cushion, but it has a cute little center tuck that I need to sew in. And since I needed to sew that anyway, I decided to sew the whole cushion instead of glue it. I'm not a great hand sewer, but it came out about as well, if not better, than if I had glued it. Plus, it was faster than waiting for the glue to dry. I turned it right side out, stuffed it, sewed it closed, and then sewed the little tuck in the center. It's pretty cute if I do say so myself. Enjoy your rest, little kitties. To finish off the second floor, we have a fishing rod, made by heat shrinking some of this tube over a wire to make the pole. The fishing line is more wire that I need to strip. Wow, did you see that? That slid off so easily. I wrap the wire around the end of the fishing pole, and then at the other end, I'm going to glue together these two little wooden fishies. The kit, of course, came with some paper to glue on, but instead, I'm going to paint them as Swedish fish. Really tiny Swedish fish. I sandwich them around the wire and drape the fishing pole out the front window. The kit also has this fish for some reason. It assisted me in part 2 holding something up to dry. Of course I'm going to repaint it, but there's this rubbery feeling coating on it, so I had to sand that off first. And then I painted it like a gummy shark. You know that candy? And we'll just lay that here, I guess. Now, as if these cats don't have enough plants outside, they also need some potted plants inside. They're going to have 2 flowering plants, which I repainted, of course. I painted the purple ones blue and the yellow ones yellow, but a lighter yellow. Yeah, even I know it's ridiculous. Then I needed to glue 2 flowers together. I guess to make them fluffier, but it didn't really accomplish that, so I'm not actually sure why. Since these flowers don't have a hole in the center, I just need to glue them to wire. That's easier said than done, so I ended up gluing them back to back. I made grass to go around each wire by cutting out some paper, cutting blades of grass, and wrapping it into a little bundle, shaping the leaves a little bit. I painted the pots blue and yellow, and then glued the grass and flowers inside. I tried bending out the flowers and shaping them, but I mostly just succeeded in pulling the flowers off. After they were all done, they were still looking a little boring. And since it worked so well with the tree, I decided to add some sparkle to the flower centers with some glitter glue. We also need one more plant that is just grass. Maybe it's like a spider plant or something. For this one, I decided to paint the grass a nice minty gradient. And then I painted the pot pink before I cut and wrapped and glued it in. Now, 2 of these pots are supposed to go on this shelf here, but just as I predicted, the window pane isn't open high enough for them to fit. That's not on me. The instructions didn't give me a specific angle to glue it. So I guess we'll just stick 1 plant here and 1 plant here. And then this last one can go here. We have 1 more floor to decorate. The roof. Is the roof a floor? Well, anyway, we need 1 more bed first. For this bed, I need to pop out some wooden pieces and glue them together. And then I need to cut out some yellow checkered fabric. I'm going to wrap this fabric around the wooden pieces, gluing it into place. I was supposed to glue cotton underneath this fabric on the other side, but I forgot. Now, the bottom of this bed is another basin, like the sofa that we made. And I'm going to glue the same yellow checkered fabric over the sides of the basin using lots and lots of glue. Once it dried, I trimmed up the bottom, glued the fabric down, and then glued this circle over it. Since I forgot to make the cushion actually cushiony, instead I decided to just stuff some cotton under the cushion and glue it down. Whatever, they have plenty of soft beds. Maybe a cat with a bad back needs a hard bed. We also need a toy for the roof, of course. This one they called a shuttlecock. Again, I'm not going to use the red paper from the kit. I'm going to use my own blue paper. I cut out a little rectangle, cut a million little slits in it to make it floofy, and then wrapped it up into a tight little bundle and glued the end of that bundle into this blue bead that I had. And we'll put that right here. The last piece that goes on the roof is this star. I don't know if it's a toy or a decoration, but I painted it pink. And that's it. I painted it pink. There we go. Finally, it's time for the cats. Here are the little cat pieces. You can see how super tiny they are. The kit came with this paper, and what I would do is cut out each cat and glue them on the front and back of the wooden pieces. I'm not going to do that. And I'm not talented enough to redesign them digitally, so I'm going to use paint markers to paint these. and I'm going to change them into more candy-themed cats. I know I haven't done well in the past with candy-themed cats, but I think these are going to come out okay. So let's get started. This is as zoomed in as my overhead camera will go. That's how small these are. Look at it compared to my chubby little fingers. Okay, this first cat is going to be cotton candy themed. I'm going to go over it with a white paint pen first, just to block out any of that gray, because I'm going to use a really light pink and light blue. I'll just sort of stab on some color, going back and forth between pink and blue, sort of messily blending it in while I build up the color. I have the paper from the kit next to me so that I can sort of have an idea where the features are. This is her little bow collar. Then I ran into a problem. The printed picture has outlines, so if I don't add outlines, you can't really tell where things like her tail are. But I'm not sure that I have anything small enough to outline this. I tried using a shadow in a darker version of pink, but that looked not great. So I went with my thinnest paint pen in a blue to draw the tail outline. And since I can't just do the tail, I went through and did all of the outlines. I did blue so that it wouldn't be as harsh as black. I touched up those shadows, and now it's time for the face. And I am legitimately terrified to do this. It's so small. Even that super fine paint marker is still pretty thick for this, so I decided to use a fine liner pen to draw on the face. I'm not going to varnish these, so they shouldn't smear. She looks so annoyed. I painted the back and then painted her edges in the same shade of blue as her outlines. I tried giving her eye shinies to help with her annoyed face, but now she just looks sort of evil. I have the perfect place for an evil kitty. This next cat is going to be a Peppermint Swirl. Like a candy cane, but, cat-shaped. He's going to require a few base coats to block out that gray, and then he's going to get some stripies. His tail's going to be vaguely over here. Have you ever tried to draw something without actually having outlines? I'll add some stripes on his back, his arm, his paw, his other little arm. His face is going to be around here, so some stripes on the top of his head and the side of his face. Let's give him some inner ears. And then for the outlines, I tried red, but the red Posca I have is the same color as the red that I used for the stripes, so I'm going to have to go with black. I tried to do really short and light strokes to keep the outlines really thin. It mostly looks okay. A little messy, but not too bad. He's going to have a little sleeping face. I flipped him over and did the back, but this time I used the Sharpie fine liner to sketch out where his features are first. And that seemed to really help. I filled in his stripes and went over the outlines with a paint marker. And then I colored the edges black. Since this little guy is sleeping, he can go up here in this little bed. This little curled up cat is going to be Strawberry Lemonade. So he got a yellow base coat, and since it seemed to work well, I added the features in with the fine liner first. Then I added Siamese style markings in pink, the strawberry part of the Strawberry Lemonade. I drew on the face, totally crooked, and went back over his outlines, adding in a few details like toe beans and lines on his feet. I outlined him with the fine Posca marker, but wow, he looks nuts. The lines got so thick. So I spent lots of time touching up the lines to thin them back out and painting over his face. Unfortunately, this Sharpie smears under paint, so it took a lot of coats to isolate and erase it. But finally, I was able to carefully draw his face back on. And he's looking good again. I painted the back, which gave me far less trouble, painted the sides, and he's done. Since he's hanging out on his back, he's in the perfect position to go down the slide. Wow, that's a fast slide. The next cat is going to be Funfetti. Something about white cats just makes me want to make them funfetti. I sketched out his face first this time. and he looks like a happy polar bear. But, oh well, we'll just add the rest of his features, like his little prim and proper legs. Give him some rosy cheeks, and some inner ears, a black collar, and finally realized he wasn't in frame for my second camera. Then I added all of his color spots and finished his outlines. The back and edges got painted, and then he can go right here next to the fishing pole. He definitely looks like he's proud of something. This next cat actually ends up being my favorite. She's going to be Smartie themed. I think they're called rockets in other places. Smarties are definitely not one of my favorite candies, but they are fun pastel colors. So she got a yellow belly and then a green body. Drawing her face on, she kind of looks like an insane owl. Or like when you use an eye enlargening filter on your pictures just a little bit too much. Her stripes are going to be pink and blue. And then I tried to fix her face by making her tummy marking going up higher, but now she sort of looks like she has no chin. I went with blue outlines for this one because I felt like Cotton Candy would be lonely being the only one with blue outlines. I adore her. She looks like me when I see someone do something real dumb. Like,
are you serious right now? What is wrong with you?
Currently, she's appalled at strawberry lemonade. Next, we have a pink cat. A pink cat. Well, maybe I should have done a white base coat. Finally, a pink cat and some brown drizzle on top. And some seeds. Yep, it's a chocolate-covered strawberry cat. A very over-it looking chocolate-covered strawberry cat. I'm going to put her here so she looks like she's guarding the house. I wouldn't want to mess with her. This last cat is going to be a Sour Patch Kid. Well, a Sour Patch Cat. And I'm painting him orange so that I hopefully need to do less coats, since he's already orange. I just want a better orange. Then he's going to get all these sour sugar dots in a few different lighter oranges. I don't really know how to make this Sour Patch Kitty-ish, so I'm just sort of putting more of the white dots to one side where the light would hit. He's going to have a blue collar and terrifying eyes. All of these cats have weird eyes. I don't know why I went with this style of drawing on such tiny cats. Once he's all done, he's going to get glued to this little fish to help him stand, so that he doesn't fall on his little face. He can go right here, the greeter of the house. I did it, friends. I finally finished this house. This took me the better part of a month from start to finish. And I absolutely love it, but I don't want to do it again for like 75 years. Or maybe less after I've had a long nap. I think my favorite parts are the cats, obviously, the little ice cream house, and the frosting on the outside of the house. But there's nothing that I don't really like. What do you think? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.